Hello, welcome. Today I'll be talking about AI in foreign language education, cultural reciprocity, and as a knowledge infrastructure. My name is Alexei Kromowski. I also go by Losha, and I'm an applied math BA and BS double major. My bachelor's thesis, which is where this research comes from, was based heavily on scholarship in linguistics, post-colonial theory, colonial theory, critical AI studies, and media and literacy theory. If the wrong man uses the right means will act the wrong way, says a Chinese proverb. The biggest collection of Chinese orature, which is traditionally performed rather than read, is called Su Wen Shui Song Kan. Is oral tradition lesser than written tradition, as many literacy standards would have you believe? Well, because oral tradition encodes sophisticated cultural knowledge, as the word Papuwi demonstrates, which I'll talk about, therefore a literacy standard that only measures an ability to read a text is measuring a narrow slice of communicative and cognitive competence. Papuwi translates as the force which causes mushrooms to push up from the earth overnight, according to a book by Anishinaabe ethnobotanist Kawita Nokwe. The linguist Jacobson's principle predicts that a language encodes what its speakers feel a need to communicate, and the word Papuwi shows a different orientation towards the natural world, one that English speakers don't have ready linguistic access to. All languages can communicate any human thought, but differ in what they require speakers to communicate. Since machines are first imagined before they are built, and since imagination is shaped by the conceptual frameworks available to the imaginer, language and culture education expands the space of what can be conceived, and therefore what can eventually be engineered. Language programs are not supplementary to STEM education, but integral to its imaginative foundation. The right means, LLMs, and STEM tools used with this foundation will, as the proverb suggests, act the wrong way. Mediums and settings. So a good language program recognizes that language is not used in a vacuum. It lives in specific contexts with specific people, in specific places and times. A program that only uses one medium, like a textbook, or one setting, like a classroom, is lacking in its quality of education. A good language program teaches students which resource is appropriate for which purpose. For example, knowledge infrastructures appropriate for a language learner should be based on how that language has historically and currently been stored and transmitted. A good language program teaches and practices ethical exchange between communities over the extraction or performance of culture. And standard literacy measures like reading a text or passing a written exam assess a narrow dimension of language competence. But learning a language involves what many indigenous North American pedagogical frameworks describe as four aspects of being: knowing with body, emotion, mind, and spirit. Written paper activities mistake one aspect of a language for the whole. Can an LLM teach a language? Well, LLMs are a sophisticated pattern matching system that navigate and recombine existing human knowledge probabilistically. Chomsky's generative grammar treats language as a finite rule system generating infinite sentences. LLMs approximate this system probabilistically. Natural language exceeds what any formal system can capture without human-level access to the world, like context, embodiment, intention, social meaning, and constant evolution. The gobbledygook that you see on the screen is we can start adding meaning to it as humans, but an LLM can only take the meaning that a human added. A language is richer than an LLM. Therefore, language programs in higher education must teach what LLMs cannot, which is currently being done only partially or not at all. As new grammars and words emerge, a language's set of valid strings always grows, but remains countably infinite, as Chomsky's generative grammar would suggest. No LLM without human-level access to context can account for these changes in a language without a human. In conclusion, LLM without all the human senses is a good model of human knowledge, but not a model of knowledge creation. An LLM isn't capable of generating genuinely novel ideas, coining new words, inventing new grammars, and making contextual discoveries, skills language learners should acquire in a quality language program. Now, question, and for the chat. What are the most important events in California history? Please drop your suggestions in the chat. Blah, 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 blah. Well, Indigenous history, as you can see, is often underrepresented, and when represented, it's often misrepresented. All these answers in the chat seem to suggest that we have a very colonial perspective on California history. A good humanities education at the center of language programs teaches one how to ask the right questions and create a more objective view of the world that recognizes multiple realities that can exist simultaneously for various people. For example, Indigenous knowledge in Western science, as described in the national bestseller by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. Certain knowledge systems are treated as universal, objective, and authoritative, while others are treated as local, subjective, or primitive. The result is not a neutral map of human knowledge, but a map of knowledge that, as it was recorded, digitized, and made accessible. LLMs may be perceived as neutral due to their computational nature, but LLM outputs language in accordance with specific epistemological tradition. Oftentimes, this means rewarding optimization, prediction, and control, and excluding values of ecological balance and cultural plurality. Hallucinations of indigenous languages, names, knowledge systems, and decontextualized fragmented local knowledge prevent a well-rounded worldview with over-reliance. Language programs, especially if indigenous or rare, require full awareness of these issues and ethical issues of knowledge control and distribution. AI can be appropriate when communities of speakers retain data sovereignty, training data retains contextual relevance, and users have an awareness of epistemological hierarchies, such as the fact that LLMs are not primary sources and should be treated as hearsay based on real facts. Nobel laureate Herbert Simon said, "A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention." Every new information technology, the printing press, the novel, the search engine, has reorganized how human attention is allocated. Concerns are not new. Goethe's novel The Sorrows of Young Werther in 1774 triggered waves of suicides, and a contributor to the Philadelphia Weekly Magazine urged booksellers to remove it from shelves, alleging that it had proved the bane of more than one family, also coming to be known as the Werther effect. For AIs, this might look like AI psychosis. Another concern was a widespread feeling that novels warped young people's view of real life, and this is where colonial frameworks comes in. LLMs deliver information faster, remove the cognitive effort of searching, synthesizing, and articulating information, and minimize attention cost, which were similar concerns with the search engine at the time. Language programs and education programs in general that over-rely on LLMs risk compromising creative potential of students and staff with overuse, and there's much evidence to back this up, as you see in my slide. The diversity of stimulus, lastly, is crucial in language programs and recognition of different ways of knowing, especially between indigenous and colonial languages. Deep understanding comes with knowledge using the four aspects of being. This can only be achieved through reciprocal relationships with the communities that speak and use the language. Language can be taught as a basis to forming relationships and thinking in new ways, rather than an informational communication tool. Languages taught with culture create an understanding and dynamic much greater than the sum of its parts, like lichen, which is an organism that's a symbiotic algae and fungus relationship. In accordance to reciprocity values for language learning, AIs must be used ethically to build relationships between communities of learners and speakers. This can mean the speaker community ownership of the AI and exchanging the LLM used for something beneficial for the community, or a student-owned LLM provided to the community of speakers in exchange for the common good, or something else entirely that provides mutually benefits for speakers and learners. My senior thesis is based on my own experience, my language learning philosophy, and I practice a lot of these principles within the limits of the resources that I have. I speak some of the languages you see on the screen. I also find that the principles of reciprocity and responsible AI usage can improve the language learning experience significantly, not just for me, but for other students as well. Thank you for listening.